Hello, welcome everyone to the VWO CONVEX 2024. I'm absolutely delighted to be on this call with Annette, actually from Primark. Just a quick intro. I'm Chris. I'm from Creative CX. We're a specialist experimentation consultancy. So we do everything A/B testing, UX research, all of that fantastic stuff. And one of our clients is Primark. So I'm delighted to have Annette here today. So, hey, Annette, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you doing?
Yes, really good. Very good. Excited to dig into a few things more Primark and learn more about what you're doing over there. So
Yes.
do you want to intro yourself first and what you do?
Sure. So I've been at Primark for a couple of years now. I was brought on to start experimentation here within digital and digitech. So yeah, I mean that feels like a long time ago now, a couple of years ago, but we've actually launched the program in May, which is why we brought on Creative CX. And yeah, we're scaling pretty well. And then in the midst of that, about a couple of weeks ago, I also brought digital analytics under my wing too. So we are aligning experimentation and digital analytics as well.
Fantastic. I think what would be really interesting for people to start off with is to hear a little bit about the Primark story, because you guys weren't really into doing e-commerce until recently, so I'm really interested to hear the background.
Yeah, so pre-Annette era in Primark, there was a business case put together for click and collect. So we are not your traditional e-commerce site. We were doing so well in our bricks and mortars business. Our stores are still our main focus, but we wanted to bring in an offering that would aid us in playing within the digital market. And that was click and collect. We do have a very pretty slide about our timeline. that's my education for Chris to be like, can you please get to the timeline slide? This is our beautiful timeline. So this is our click and collect journey so far. As I said, I started experimentation here at Primark. Experimentation has been my personal bread and butter for many years, but click and collect for us as a whole is actually one of the biggest experiments I've ever worked in. We started in a small kind of sample size of stores that were in the Northwest. And that was just with kids wear and nursery. And that proved to be really successful. So we actually launched that in the end of 2020. And then in July 2023, so last summer, we expanded to all stores within London. So I'm a London girl, so I was very happy about that. So it is currently in London. The correct term is any store within the M25. It just doesn't. There isn't as it's not as memorable as within London. And then actually in May or April this year, it was announced that Click and Collect will be expanding to the whole of Great Britain by the end of 2025. So it has been an experiment in itself. It's been a huge experiment, and it's been great to be part of it and seeing all the kind of pieces of the puzzle that we've needed to put together, and also see the team grow so rapidly. Even in experimentation and digital analytics, we've just had a new starter now. We've got 2 more analysts joining, and also a specialist within experimentation joining at the end of the year. So it's a really exciting time for us here at Primark. And I'm really, really looking forward to the expansion.
Fantastic. And this is a quasi experiment, really, isn't it? Where you weren't able to, there's no way you could properly randomize A/B tests, something like as big as this. So that's why you chose representative areas and compared the performance of different stores to one without doing the trial. And of course, the click and collect is it's a perfect kind of omnichannel journey, isn't it? Where it's not just about the online. You have to see what happens to people when they get to store, which is fascinating part of this experiment.
Yeah, I think for us that keeping the stores at the forefront is definitely a really important part of our strategy. Click and collect gets people into the stores. If you go into a Primark store and see our click and collect offering, you can see that the tills are in a way where you can walk through the store, and anything that you kind of missed online, you can actually pick it up in store whilst you're picking up your click and collect order. And it's that that additional item in the basket. It's the second basket that's for us very valuable.
And of course, at Primark, there are so many easy to add items, are there? There's a lot of it's very reasonably priced, so it's very easy to throw in another item. So
For me, it's the phone
totally get it.
gets me every single time, those charges. I'm like,
The what? Sorry?
phone charges, the extra wires
Ah,
that you can get. Yeah, they're very well placed at the till. And I was like, oh, I could do another one of those. So I always end up getting one of those. But yes, we are in a market where those items are very accessible for everyone. So yeah, we're really hoping that that second basket is going to be even more valuable once we've expanded nationally.
yeah, and I think this hits upon a really important point as part of experimentation. Experimentation is almost a mindset. It's a way of thinking. It's a way to get better evidence. It's a way to get near to, we want to detect kind of cause or inference. But and sometimes it's not possible to do everything within your A/B testing tool. Sometimes you need to be more creative with how you set up the experiment, such as we have other clients that test their advertising, that test the power of ads, but they can't do that all the time for an A/B test. So they have to think about what the sample is for the A and the B version and test in different areas, test in different parts of Europe, for example. So there's all kinds of part of the skill of being an experimenter is your creativeness, I think, in setting up the experiment in the first place.
I think for us, definitely, whilst we are still within a smaller sample size for click and collect, I think it's been a real opportunity for us to actually learn that skill and figure out as well that with the different markets that we actually can do A/B testing in. So there's a couple of other markets that we can, from an engagement perspective, gain some wins or some losses, but actually conduct experimentation in. But for click and collect, I think that's for me, selfishly, one of the big reasons why I'm quite excited for the expansion, because it just means that from an experimentation point of view, those opportunities will definitely grow.
Which brings us on to the second question that I have here. Where are you on your experimentation and personalization journey at Primark? So you touched on it already, but where are you in terms of, like, you said you launched a program in May, you're in the early days. What does that look like?
We are definitely at the beginning. I think I spent the first year in my role driving a data-driven culture. So getting people to adopt certain tools, making sure that people are instilling that data-driven experimentation mindset. So that was sort of my role prior to the program beginning. We were going through an RFP, implementation of the tool, the testing tool, etc. Those are the things that kind of prevented us from testing right from when I began. So I think that was one of the things. So I had to be quite creative of, well, what could I do here to create opportunity here at Primark? And I'm quite lucky that I had a year to actually do that. So it meant that once experimentation was possible within our environment, we could start testing, but with making sure that there were stakeholders that were on board, because we'd already instilled that kind of mindset. We'd already started certain initiatives that grew that. Going back to your question, like where we are at the moment, well, I mean, we've just started. So I actually counted before this call. We've done 10 tests since.
Okay.
We've done 2 server-side tests, which is, I think, a success for us. And that means that because at the moment, digital and digitech are well, they're separate but not separate. But it just means that cohesively where everybody's on board. So it means that, we've got product owners, we've got developers that are on board this kind of mindset, which is quite difficult considering where we were 2 years ago, where we were doing this like international migration and it was like a long list of just do it. So it's like, how do you go from this kind of just do it mindset to, okay, we now need to think about what we're optimizing, what tests we're going to run, and in what order. So the prioritization piece. And those two mindsets are actually very, very different. So I'm lucky that I had that time at my beginning of being here at Primark. But yes, 10 tests so far, really hoping that we will scale. Really interesting results as well. And I think now we are in a stage where we have to get people used to the losses. That's probably the next challenge that we have is, okay, we've spent time building this test, it's lost, what do we do now? Does everybody feel hard done by it? They got, might have stakeholders that want to like dig into the data even more and try and extract a win when it's actually just a loss. And it's just managing those expectations as well. So that's where we're at the moment. Very exciting.
Good. And it's a scale up as well, isn't it? So it's a lot more in the last month or so than in May, for example, in terms of the scaling, the number of tests.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's one of the things that we really want to track. We want to make sure that we're scaling up, but we also just want to make sure that we are focused on those priorities. So you can scale up with quick wins, with easy to implement tests, but are they also tests that are going to bring us value? So that's definitely the juggle there.
And getting 2 server-side tests done is pretty good. There are many organizations that it takes a couple of years of client-side testing before they get to that stage. So it sounds like that's, and actually that's because of how you've started to embed experimentation, isn't it? But you're not, when it comes to operating model, when there's sometimes a very centralized team where it's a small optimization team who are doing everything, including coming up with all the ideas and all the A/B tests and everything, versus the center of excellence, perhaps when you're actually getting all the product teams involved and you're starting to become more of an advisor, a support function, versus decentralized, where every single team is doing experimentation, but often in a different way. Where would you say you are at the moment?
I think it's really interesting because I think the more I am here at Primark, the more I actually think that I am an advisor. I just don't internally believe that I am one, but I do go on calls and think, gosh, I'm advising here, not really doing very much. But it's more about instilling best practices and making sure that, for example, the right KPI is being used for success, making sure that the prioritization framework is definitely aligned. I think in terms of how we're operating, because we've just started, I am in the thick of it, definitely. But I think as the team grows, the alignment with experimentation specialists with each product squad is definitely a vision that we have. So that will be the plan going forward. And once you have a specialist that's embedded in a product squad, in terms of server-side tests, in terms of understanding what value, but also mitigating risk, those levels as well, that kind of best practice advice, the experimentation mindset would solely sit with that specialist. And we've found it to be really successful so far because in one way, I think at the beginning, it was sort of like me with a sales pitch, saying everybody needs to get on board this experimentation mindset train. But actually, once you start putting a structure in place where you're actually embedding somebody within your team who's a specialist with an experimentation background within a product squad, that is probably going to be more successful in terms of scaling within that squad. So we've trialed it with one squad and it's been really successful. And I'd probably say I mean, if they were in the room, if the product owner was in the room, they definitely say that in terms of how we're more aligned, we're working closer, we have definitely a more harmonious relationship as well. And also it's a shared roadmap of what that looks like. So, there might be something that's aligned with their KPI that I'm completely unaware of, but when we're collaborating, actually looking at the prioritization framework together, the kind of agreement or the agreement that we have in terms of what server-side tests is going to be put live or going to be built, the alignment is across everybody, and it just means that there's no kind of miscommunication about it, and it's been done in a way that is very aligned with experimentation best practice. So I'd probably say that's how it works at the moment. But I do think that because we are product ways of working here, that was the way that we could actually start scaling.
So let's dig into that a bit more, because that's quite interesting, isn't it? So a lot of people out there probably have different roadmaps. So they may have a product, because you have 3 squads, which are effectively 3 product teams, don't you?
Yeah.
That are responsible for different parts of the journey, for different parts, because you have an app, don't you? You have an app, and you have the website, and you have different teams responsible for different parts. Is that right?
Yeah. So no app at the moment, but we, in terms of
sorry, I forgot.
but at the moment, we have there's more squads, but for experimentation, we align with search and browse. So that's everything to do with search and PLPs and PDPs. We have content and inspiration. They're in charge of article pages, homepage, category pages. And then we have checkout, which is obviously checkout. The plan is once I actually only have one specialist in my team at the moment, bless her, who has been part of building this and making this a success. And the fact that we've been so successful has warranted another specialist to come on board. And at that point, we'll start splitting the specialists into squads. But even with just the 2 of us to date, we have a prioritization framework for each of the squads. And one of the pillars of the prioritization framework are the KPIs that are aligned with the specific squad. So it just makes it easier and just more personal for the use of, whatever it is that they're working on. And it means that the alignment that we have with the squads is along with UX research, it means that if we're all kind of aligned with what test or what project we're working on, it just makes things much easier. So it's like an extended squad almost. So you've got the squad, you've got the product owner, you've got the developer, you've got the business analyst, and then you've got kind of the experimentation specialist, you have a UX researcher, you have a designer and those 3 people sit within digital. So it just means that it's almost like an extension, but those kind of expertise are obviously sat within those teams. So it's working so far. It's working well. I think, like I said, I think the research aspect and the continuous discovery point of view, that is something that we definitely need to hone in on more. But it's kind of like step by step when you talk about experimentation mindset. First thing is getting a test live and making sure that everybody's like really invested in it. Is it exciting people? Are they motivated? Do people want to know the results of it? And then in the background, you're trying to get a prioritization framework in place and get people aligned with it. And then you're trying to get people heavily invested in discovery projects. So it's kind of like a stage by stage thing.
But it's so good, but it's very different from what you're saying, because actually the ideas are coming from those different people, from product. They're not just coming from a centralized optimization team. They're thinking optimization at the same time, aren't they? They're thinking, how are we going to solve this problem, which we've discovered in research? And then you're working together, which I think is absolutely one of the key components of a successful experimentation, product experimentation function in any organization, rather than having But the typical thing is when optimization is handled completely separately, you end up with clashes. You end up with a product team working on some initiative, building out a feature. And then there's another team optimizing it. But sometimes the one team doesn't know what the other's doing. And then you can have some clashes and misalignments. And I think it's great to hear that you're already thinking about those things and the future a bit more, even if you're early on in your journey.
Yeah, I think we're lucky in a sense where we've been brought into quarterly planning from a product perspective in quite early. So you'll see that when we go into those quarterly planning sessions, the client side tests are on the same boards as server side tests. So we definitely know that there's not going to be any clashes. And also, even those client side tests, even though they might not be implemented by the squad, they're still heavily invested because it's moving the dial for that team. So those KPIs are still aligned with that squad. So we are quite lucky with that in that sense. And I'd probably say we're very lucky because it comes from top down. I think right from the beginning, I've had so much support from leadership that believe in the experimentation mindset. So I'm very, very lucky. I think one of the things that we've realized more recently actually is it's not just the prioritization framework, it's also a test hypothesis template. It just, because some people think, gosh, I've got to add like data insight. I can't remember where I got it from and what's the supporting evidence, and actually just giving them a template that they need to fill in just helps their memory. And, they can just attach whatever deck or take a screenshot of a dashboard or whatever. But it just, even if you've got somebody who's not from a data background or not from an experimentation background, they don't realize it, but they're starting to think in that way because they're writing it down on a relatively easy form. So
everybody's using the same hypothesis template now then?
Yeah.
It's also an area that's often done in many different ways in different parts of a large organization. So
yeah, I guess we've had challenges when we've tried to implement it where I don't have time. I don't have time to fill it in. And it's just part of the process, unfortunately. We have to know. And so I don't know, you have to put your foot down a little bit sometimes just to implement a process. But I completely understand on the other side, this is the newest function, that's we're asking everybody to add an additional step in their work day to day or whatever. So, I'm very conscious of that. So you have to be sympathetic also to be like, I understand that you have a lot on your plate and this is like another thing that you need to do. But this is the way that we're going to be doing it from now on. Otherwise, it's going to be very difficult to prioritize. So if you've got something that is like really going to move the dial on like one of our like top KPIs and you don't have any data supporting it, it's most likely not going to get built. So, the importance of making sure that they are bought into the hypothesis template is something that we're working on at the moment.
And I know, moving on to a different part, the opportunity discovery, like where do people's ideas come from? How do you even uncover all the problems you want to solve in the first place? I know I took this screen grab from something you used before, which was, explain what's going on here, Annette.
So I actually think that one of the most motivating ways that you can launch experimentation or an experimentation mindset within an organization is by doing an ideation workshop and showing them interviews of real life people going through your website. I didn't actually, it's the first time that I've actually seen en masse the reaction to an interviewee. Like I didn't realize that everyone's like, oh my God, that's crazy. I think sometimes what happens, especially where we are at the moment, we're working so hard for Click and Collect to be successful and making sure that the website's, up to date. And like, there's lots of things that, is the forefront of our mind when we're trying to drive and scale something. But actually, let's just park all of that for a minute. And why don't we just figure out what our users actually think about our website? And one of the first ideation workshop that we actually did was in partnership with Creative CX. And this lady was one of the interviewees, and she just was so shocked that we even had a website, and then was even more shocked that we had a click and collect offering. And the joy on her face was just like next to nothing. It was great. And automatically, just like that, we were utilizing at one of our quarterly, like, big digital and digitech meetings. Like, the reaction of the people in the room was like, oh my gosh, like, this is like one of a genuine user going through our website. So this is one part, but it's also the opportunities that were driven from this. I think everyone was quite shocked with how users actually navigate through the site and the reasons why. So we have things obviously like GA4 in Content Square that help us for quantification, helps us with journey analysis and funnels, etc. But there's nobody there who's like providing actual qualitative insights into the reasons why users do a specific journey. So it was really, really interesting. And for us, within that session, we showed a series of clips that were recorded, and then we showed some quantification of a problem statement that was driven from that. And then we actually split the room into different groups to try and address that problem statement. And I think that is one of the best ways you can get people on board. So if you think about it, with Primark, like, experimentation did not exist. So we're asking people like merchandising, content, SEO, et cetera, et cetera. We're asking teams who are not necessarily waking up and thinking about experimentation all the time. But you're suddenly giving them a really fun activity to provide a solution to a relatively big problem, because we've just shown them that this problem is quite big. And then you're collaborating across the function or the department with people that you probably don't work with day to day to come up with the solutions. And I thought it was just such a lovely way to introduce the experimentation mindset. And essentially, that's all it is really, is you're using qualitative and quantitative data to come up with problem statements, and ideate to create hypotheses. And from that, I think we generated about 35 different hypotheses just from that hour and a half. And I'd probably say it's an underrated area with other businesses. I don't think it's utilized in a way because people don't realize that it actually motivates people who are not from a data-driven or experimentation background. So if you're struggling with that, I definitely would say that is definitely a key area that I would hone in on if you're struggling with getting hypotheses outside of your team to come flying in. So yeah, definitely one way.
And it's interesting, earlier on you were talking about how your hypotheses template, and I think you were hinting at maybe how things were done before in terms of just having a solution and running with it type of thing. And then sometimes, it needs to be backed up by data, or it needs to have data supporting it. But actually, if you do things this way round, everything will be supported by data, because effectively you're looking for the data and the customer problems first, aren't you? So therefore, naturally, all the ideas for 35 or whatever you said off the back of this are based on solving a problem. So almost naturally, this improves your whole process.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, there's another layer of that happens, which one's more compatible for the website? Does our brand allow that idea to happen? Does it require an unreasonable amount of budget, like some super duper AI widget or whatever? There are things, there's some wild ideas that come from it, but I think it's so interesting, start figuring out who your experimentation ambassadors are. And it means that you can kind of create a little mini network. But also, I think it just helps people start thinking in a very different way. So even though, I'd probably say, like, out of that 35, there are some that obviously we can't do. But I do think that it's just a fun activity to do, first of all, and it makes sure that you are completely aligned with best practices, and it just means that the hypotheses that you are getting, whether or not you can do them or not because of whatever, they do fit within the prioritization framework. So there are always going to be there are always going to be some easy wins. Things are definitely aligned, and things that you can do that come out of it.
That's great. That's really good to hear. And I think connected to this, I know we did an experimentation day also, didn't we? Which was a lot of fun. And this was a bit different because this actually involved getting other brands and other people in a wider community. So this was a lot of fun. So this is effectively what you were doing internally, but on a bigger scale, where you invited many other people to help solve some customer problems, and we did it in a fun way to almost promote experimentation in the UK, really, didn't we? I remember. So there's a nice picture at the top left of you doing the intro talk, and there's one on the bottom left of me. But in the middle we had all the teams doing the ideation once they'd been shown all the problems, shown those really engaging usability testing videos, and also how they were quantified, like how many people it affects. And then on the right, you can see presentations where all the different teams had to present their solutions to the audience, and then we gave out prizes and things. So this was a lot of fun.
I think the setup of this is really good because we are so entangled on our devices. This is one of the only workshops probably where you are just using paper, scissors, and glue. And it just means that the interaction between your team members is very high, and it means that collaboration's there. So I think for us, one of the things from a cultural perspective is that we are a growing digital function. And it just means that from a cultural perspective, we need that collaboration. We need people to be fostering relationships across teams. So even from a cultural perspective, never mind experimentation, which obviously is a priority, but let's put that aside for a minute. Just from a cultural perspective, I think it's a really good exercise to do. So yeah, I really enjoy it. I think the problem statement here was quite tricky because it was a click and collect versus non-click and collect journey, which was really interesting actually. And I think here, the idea is, because we invited other experimentation experts from other businesses, it's just really interesting to see what hypotheses they come out with. And I think, they do want to be challenged. So it's actually quite an interesting problem statement. So, for them to really, really have a think about it and, get together with, other experimentation experts with other brands and create a prototype. I mean, they look like they were having lots of fun.
Yeah, don't they? And I mean, I always love having scissors, and it's a bit like Blue Peter, isn't it? For those who remember that session. So no, that's good. I wonder. I think one of the key things with the session you ran internally as well was getting people to think beyond their initial idea. I know that's often a problem in product teams, with designers sometimes as well. People, they fall in love with one idea, they get all behind it, and then it's sometimes it makes everything after that, like it makes many aspects of experimentation of how can my idea not win? What happens if it loses? And all of those challenges that are quite difficult for people when they start off. Getting people to think beyond their first idea and have multiple solutions to a single problem, I think, is a really good kind of educational aspect of just getting people ready for experimentation.
Yeah, I think on that, I mean, I'm also a victim of this sometimes, and I have to kind of check in all the time to be like, is it the right thing to do? I do think collaboration obviously helps so much here, and seeing the different hypotheses that come in. But there is a step in the workshop that we did and the workshop internally as well, where we did something called Crazy Eights. So everybody has a piece of paper, you fold it so you have 8 boxes in the end, and I can't remember, is it you have a minute per
8 minutes for 8 ideas.
Exactly,
Hopefully.
8 minutes for 8 ideas. So you try on average trying to hit a minute per box. And what's quite interesting is what your brain does, because your brain just goes, oh my God, I need to like pull my ideas down. And that's why you kind of say you're like a gamble one. So that's why some people put like AI crazy widget.
It's all about the wild card
Yeah,
idea,
wild
having one of
card,
them, right?
that's it. So that's why you do see those. But it's interesting what people put in those. And then once you have those squares filled in and then you speak to your teammates about it, what usually happens is that you can actually merge a bunch of ideas into one. So actually your hypothesis becomes a lot more valuable all of a sudden, and your idea. So I do think that's a very good process, definitely, to do. And our UX research team, who are also relatively new alongside experimentation, are very much so brought into that. So we do move as one when it comes to that. So
Sounds great. Actually, moving on to a slightly different question. You mentioned earlier about a bit of a top-down approach in terms of buy-in for experimentation, because I realize that it's often a struggle for teams out there, for people out there. They might be doing really great work in their little team, but it's hard to, and you know that this could benefit so many other teams out there. If only I could kind of spread this culture of experimentation. We know it's going to benefit so many other teams, but it's quite tricky when you're effectively busy doing all the work to change an organization in that way. So how did that come up? Because it sounds like at Primark, they are fairly bought in at a senior level now, which has made a big difference.
I mean, yes. Is it just me? Are they just bought into me? No, I'm joking. No, they're not. I'm very, very lucky here. And I think I've said it so many times, so I might as well say it again, that I was a real nomad before I came to Primark. I've kind of like floated and, kept on trying different things and went from kind of role to role, trying to find my home. And I think Primark, because of how they value experimentation and data and analytics, it's definitely something that is of immense value to me. And that is mostly, it is because it comes from top down. I think one of the reasons is the ROI piece. I think it's incredibly hard to get ROI elsewhere when you're optimizing a site. I think when I started doing the program, or started kind of implementing the first steps of the program and trying to get people on board, a lot of the things that I was hearing was, oh, we can just do pre-post analysis. And I was like, no, I get it, but no. And you're never really going to know the effect of a change if you don't do a traditional good old A/B test. And it just means as well that when you have to understand what makes your stakeholders tick. So like, for example, if you're the team who's in charge of user generated content, let's say, if you're that team and you're like, right, we're going to spend some money on an agency that's going to, help us get this on board, and we're going to do this, and we're going to ask for loads of dev work to get that implemented, but you don't know the ROI on it, like, at all. Like, so what about if you do an A/B test? And yes, unfortunately, you do have to wait a tiny bit to get those results. But isn't it more fantastic if you go back to the business and say, hey, that thing that, my team's been working on for absolutely ages, and that thing that's going to really move the dial, I figured out through an A/B test that it's brought us X amount of money. And I think that's an amazing piece. And once you bring stakeholders on that journey, or even leadership on that journey, they start getting on board. It's like everybody, well, I'd like to think that most people that work within an e-commerce or digital background, you do have an element of a commercial mind, right? And the ROI piece is huge. So we do track that. And it's something that I am championing from a experimentation perspective is that, we do need to go back to the business and report the ROI, not just for us, but for all the other teams that have contributed, collaborated, and, supported us on our journey.
So that's been one of the most successful ways to get the buy-in, to actually talk to different teams, find out, what are they trying to drive anyway in terms of their value, and then sell them the idea of A/B testing as a way to really figure out what the ROI is, figure out what impact they're making as a team.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, this is just a challenge not a challenge, more an opportunity that we've had for digital, where we're bringing people on that journey. We're like, we can show you how much impact that idea that you were doing has created. But what about if we went to the rest of Primark and we went to, for example, a men's buyer who was like, oh, I'm not sure if, this lifestyle image is going to work more than this kind of flat lay white background image. And we were investing lots of money into, taking those shoots. But we're not sure. It's like we're, even outside digital and getting, our teams who are traditionally from the bricks and mortar, how do we then bring them on that journey? And you really do have to pick on the things that make them tick and the big projects that they're working on. Not that I've been successful in that quite yet, because obviously we've just started this, but it is something that, we do see as a huge opportunity. That it just brings in that collaboration piece again, making sure that we're, the right people in the room and the right ideas are coming through and people are bought into kind of the process and that ROI piece. But it's definitely, people don't like a process, but they definitely like a bit of ROI. So.
Exactly. And it's not just the uplift that you can achieve in a particular area, it's the cost savings as well. I think especially in retail and e-commerce, you need to think about this. The costs of doing a different style of shoot, for example, the costs of having all model shots versus cutouts, and like you say, maybe lifestyle versus non-lifestyle.
Yeah, also like the number of images that you have in a carousel. Like, do you need a zoomed in? Do you need a full body? Do you need, do you need the lifestyle and the flat lay? Do you need a zoomed in, zoom out? Like, I'm not saying that it doesn't drive value. I'm saying that for your experiments will tell you what's right for your business. It's not one fits all. The experiments will guide you in what works for the business.
Yeah, totally. And also when it comes to, we've had success of just, it's not always about looking for an uplift in conversion rate. With many of our clients, we test third-party tools. So when a tool provider comes in and promises a massive uplift in conversion rate, no worries, sign here. You're going to definitely get this uplift from our special AI tool, for example. What a lot of the work we do is help our clients to build an A/B test to really truly identify whether it adds value or not. So you can test so much more than just the UI on a website.
Yeah, definitely.
Valuable.
I do think mitigating the risk, also things like, when you implement something, sometimes you implement it incorrectly and it fires errors and all this sort of stuff. Like it's much better to approach that with an experimentation mindset. There is another thing that I was going to say, and it was around sometimes it doesn't win or lose. Maybe
how do you get people to come on board with that idea that they're fantastic? All the knowledge they have over the years isn't necessarily going to result in a winner every single time.
Exactly, and it's quite interesting because I think because the program was slightly delayed, we had some very passionate stakeholders with some interesting ideas that they wanted to put live, and once they were put live, they were really shocked by the impact, whether it won, lost, or didn't do either, just nothing happened. I think I do find it quite an interesting topic, and I think I've said that before, can't remember when. Gosh, I talk so much, where I talked about, a big part of experimentation is stakeholder management. It's a huge part of what we do. And it's that fine balance between, managing stakeholders and your results, because it's the truth, And also making sure that you're keeping the motivation going if they get the response that they don't particularly want to hear about a test. It's definitely a soft skill that is needed from somebody in the team. It doesn't have to be everyone. I appreciate that everybody has their own kind of buckets of expertise, but it's definitely something that should exist within the team.
No, very cool. Actually, I thought one thing I would share, because I know you talked about pre and post testing. You mentioned where people would launch something and then try to detect afterwards whether it worked or not. And of course, we all know that try detecting a 5 or even a 10% uplift week by week, actually, it's a nightmare. So one task, because we had another client who was suffering from this a bit. So we actually did an AA test when nothing had changed whatsoever over a few weeks on the website. They're very early on in maturity level. And the team then presented the results of this AA test that ran for 2 weeks. Sorry, that was just after the 1 week. And we used some of the data to show them the variant, to show them that things, but data is very different week after week. So the first thing we did, when there had been no changes, we just presented them with 1 week versus another. And naturally, there was a 5 or 10% improvement because the weeks just change all the time.
Oh.
So that solved the first problem. The second problem was that actually they like to call a test too early. That was it. And the solution, which is another problem, when people start looking at results after a few days and wanting of an A/B test. So actually, that's where we use the AA test. So we actually took an AA test, and then we demonstrated that after 3 days, even in the AA test, when there's no difference at all, you can see results, dramatic results. And it was almost like I know we were playing with or they were playing with their stakeholders a little bit, but those tactics can be quite useful to educate, actually, to show them differences and things.
Yeah, it's hard. It's quite hard to explain unless you have evidence. So I do think that is a good approach. Definitely, I'm quite lucky. We've definitely shifted from the pre and post discussions these days. So that in itself has been
it's a job well done, Annette. Well done.
Thank you.
So, but I wanted to end on the last question, which was: it sounds like things are going great very early on. You just to even have run some server-side tests this early is very impressive, to be honest. But I think that comes down to your approach of including teams in everything you're doing rather than just taking it and holding it to yourself. And I think that's a testament to that. But what are the biggest challenges you are currently facing, and how are you addressing them?
I'd probably say that on a bad day, I can be relatively impatient. I think that's one of the things. I don't think patience comes to me naturally. And I think if people were to be honest, they'd probably agree with me. And I think starting a program, you do have to have a level of patience. You do have to have a level of compassion and understanding of stakeholders. So that's definitely something that I personally have overcome. And I think that's probably one of the reasons why so far the program has been quite successful. I think where are we going next? I think it's definitely about that scaling up, and the speed to set up tests is definitely an area that I think we need to work on. Do we have the right process in place for post-test analysis? Are we doing the right? So there's one thing around prioritization framework and make sure we're choosing the right tests in terms of impact, but are we also choosing tests that are bringing in other stakeholders into our little experimentation world? Is there more that we can be doing in terms of the types of tests that we are building, and maybe prioritizing tests still within the prioritization framework, but also from a cultural perspective? Are we kind of like ticking a little box?
That's really, that's super interesting, because if you were purely doing it, because your aim isn't just about driving the ROI straight away, because otherwise then you end up with, you're probably going to focus on just a couple of your core teams.
Yeah.
But it's because you have another ambition, isn't it? Which is to scale experimentation to all the different teams at Primark. So you have to consider that's really interesting. You have to consider experiments just to bring in different team members.
Yeah. And I think, when I started this, I was like, no, it's what the framework is saying. And then you start realizing after a while, it's like, sometimes you have to think from a cultural perspective and also think about longevity of the program and, how influential certain people can be and, what are the things that they're driving, and kind of connecting, the dots. And so a culture column within the framework, I wouldn't do that, but almost like an invisible column, should sort of be there, because you're thinking about, because you're starting the program, does it involve a lot of people that are going to be excited by it? Yeah, and then after that is around communication. So, we've been working so hard on making sure the tests are going live and we're getting people on board and implementing the framework and getting used to a new testing tool, etc.
That's right. No, I think one of the ones we mentioned before was this: people very used to a long list of JDIs. So just delivering, got so used to this way of working. If I persist, keep on asking, it'll happen.
Oh, yeah.
So I think it's how the product teams are very much about, that's what they were used to. That was the world they were used to.
Yeah. So I guess one of the other challenges we have that still kind of exists is that kind of just do it mindset and not implementing the experimentation mindset. It's like we do have that support from the top. And for us, there are pockets of people and teams that are on board with the experimentation mindset. But I also think that people accidentally sometimes just go into a just do it. And also, on top of that, it depends on how desperately they want it. So sometimes people take a little back alley route to try and get a just do it done. And then it comes full circle. Because we are aligned with product, we'll find out. And then I go, hang on, how did that get on the roadmap? Let's go back a bit. I think that needs to be a test. And again, because I have the support from leadership, usually it does become an experiment, because the impact is great, but also the risk is great. So if it's something that's an incredibly huge change, like, it needs to be an experiment because we need to mitigate the risk.
So explain the just do it in a bit more. Let's tell me a little bit more about that. So is it because they are still thinking in this kind of delivery roadmap type of frame of thinking, where they just create a roadmap of features that functionality they know they want to deliver because they got used to working in that way? And is that what they fall back to, that way of, we just need to, or almost not imagining that it might not work? Is that right? Or
maybe I don't. Actually, I don't think so. I think it's more, we have stakeholders that have been waiting for things to happen for a couple of years. Some people have been waiting for a long time. And I completely get it. If you've got a big team and the thing that you've wanted to get changed has been deprioritized because we've been scaling so rapidly, and there's been so much that we've needed to do on the website. Naturally, there are going to be stakeholders that feel like the thing that they are trying to focus on has been deprioritized for good reason, but still, nobody likes to be deprioritized. I certainly don't like to be deprioritized. So, I understand where they're coming from. And sometimes what happens is, as they're so eager to get that feature or that, that component or whatever built, they're like, please just do it. Just do it right now. Like, let's not test it. But then you sort of have to remind them of the ROI. Like, okay, you've been waiting for a long time. What is a couple of weeks? Like, just wait. Let's just try and get that ROI. And also, it's just fostering that relationship. I guess before, there weren't go-to experimentation individuals in the business, whereas we are around going, we're on your side, we're here to help you, but you need to go through this route because you won't get that ROI.
No, absolutely. And then, so, I mean, I think, you know, the, 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 just moving forward, I suppose when you get a bigger team, you can have that team supporting more the different product teams, can't you? So effectively, they can all work in parallel when it comes to experimentation. So I imagine there'll be less of a there won't be blockers because they'll be continuously experimenting within their teams, within their squads.
Yeah, and also I think because there's, we're going to be working on the alignment with digital analytics as well. It just means that the alignment of the digital analytics project will also be aligned with experimentation. I mean, analytics is, it's not just experimentation, but there will be a proportion of it that is dedicated to discovery. Whereas everybody, because of how quickly we've been doing things, we've definitely been kind of trading focus, but also, the process of, for example, like tagging and making sure that everything's being tracked right. That's been like a really big focus for us. Whereas now it's like, again, as much as we're also trying to instill experimentation mindset and optimizing the site, we also need to make sure that that resource is available. So there are people who are dedicated to discovery and doing those deep dives. So it's definitely, I always say that, UX, research, design, digital analytics, and experimentation, we really should be moving sort of as one. Like there should be an alignment there. And we should be speaking the same language as products, because if there's a misalignment, then there's going to be a miscommunication, or people are not going to be brought on whatever tests we want to get built. Like the alignment piece is it takes a while to get right, but it's definitely worth it in the long run.
Cool, fantastic. And so what's next for Primark's experimentation program? What does the next 6 months, 1 year look like?
I think we need to scale. Well, we need to scale our server-side tests and our client-side tests. I think when we started the program, it was kind of like quick wins. What can we do really quickly, and what's not going to? Because we're kind of like we're from a risk-adverse background. We didn't want to start building very complex tests that was going to rock the boat. So we had to do very simple tests at the beginning. And those quick wins. Not saying that quick wins and easy to implement tests aren't impactful, but I'm excited to start building some slightly more complex tests, things that are going to be aligned with teams that are untapped from an experimentation point of view as well. So I think that's definitely one area that we focusing on. The other piece will be segmentation. So definitely in the next 6 months, we'll be looking at segmentation. What's our most valuable segments that we should be using? What experiences or what components do those segments want to be seeing versus others? And enhancing that experience for our users from a segmentation perspective. And then hopefully, I always say light years ahead, probably not light years ahead, but actually start doing a bit of personalization. So definitely working on the plan for segmentation and personalization going forward.
Cool. Because your users have very different needs, don't they? I mean, just thinking about the journey from Primark at the moment, I might well be just researching a particular item just to see if it's in stock in my local store. Or I might be wanting to buy it now on click and collect. Or there may be 100 other reasons. Each of those, I might have completely different user needs and motivations to the next user, to the next customer. So that's where the opportunity lies, doesn't it, for personalization?
Yeah, and I think even going back to the beginning, I think our journey is so different from others. You might not even know about click and collect at Primark. So it's like, what do we do for that segment of users? So I think it's complex in a way where we have to learn from our own data and insights. But then on the other side, it's really exciting. And we will probably always be surprised. But no, I'm very excited.
I mean, now just in my instance, my logged in state in Primark has my store saved next to it, doesn't it? My local store. So even that, of course, is a time saver for me. And that's something you know about people now, don't you? For those who are logged in versus someone completely brand new to Primark. So yeah, that sounds like a good 6 or 12 months ahead for you.
Definitely, I'm very different from the previous six months.
No.
But yes, I always say that. I always think here at Primark, I always thought, oh, like these are the things they all do, and then you come out with something very, very different after the next 6 months, because there is so much to do, but also we live and work in a forever changing environment. So you have to pivot, you have to adapt. And it just means also that the impact and the priority changes all the time too. So yeah, really exciting.
And what would you, I mean, from your perspective, because a lot of people in your shoes as such who are building up experimentation programs, getting all of this going. What tips or recommendations would you want to pass on to other people, would you say?
If you are kind of leading and creating an experimentation program, and well, it depends really. If you're sort of on your own, which I was, and it was the first time where I've been a solo act in a long, long time. I think I came from a place where I had like quite big teams around me. So it was definitely a big cultural shock. I think the first thing is actually the experimentation mindset and looking at your tool stack. That's one of the biggest things. You have to know that what the capabilities that you have, and also bringing people on that journey, whether you kind of brand it as experimentation mindset. Sometimes that can scare people at first, but definitely like a data-driven culture first. I mean, that's the first thing that we did here. First thing we did here is that we realized that there was only digital analytics that we're using, our analytics tools. So, now we have a weekly data and insight surgery where it's an open door where any stakeholder can come in, or their teams can come in and ask how they set up a simple dashboard, or how do they find, I don't know, like how do they set up an alert in Content Square, or how do they analyze a journey for a specific user segment? Like these are sort of questions that we get in surgery every single week. But that open door policy, I think, is really, really important, because typically, especially in other businesses that I've worked in, analytics is kind of like this wizardry that happens, behind closed doors, and nobody really knows what happens. That you submit a request and something gets spat out, and it looks really intelligent, and you're glad you have it, but you're not sure how it was created. We're sort of trying to change that mindset here, and say to people, you can, do this, and you can actually grow a data-driven mindset. So that's kind of one of the initiatives I would definitely say, and I would advise somebody. And if you are worried with that, we also have data champions. So we have a smaller network of individuals that are placed within different teams, even the non-data driven teams that we upskill. So, the more you hone into a smaller network of people that belong in different teams, the more you'll grow and foster that relationship. So when the time comes when you're like, oh, we're starting this thing called experimentation, you've already fostered that relationship, and you're ready to kind of tap into, the right people, and who you can speak to, and who's going to be an ambassador. So I definitely would advise that too. The other thing is the alignment of prioritization framework. I really could not emphasize that more. It's incredibly important. I think here there was a couple of weeks, I think I said prioritization about 1 million times. But it's just the culture that we come from. We come from this kind of like super speedy, super efficient, just do it, like things need to just go, 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 go. And I'm coming going, okay, hold on, everyone. Let's just think about this. Let's just prioritize. And I think once you get that on board and the alignment is there, people are bought into it. And the only way you can actually do it is by carry on showing it to people. Like, oh, you have an idea, let me put it into, then you kind of like, they're watching you type it into your prioritization framework. They're watching you kind of score it. They get bought into this idea. They're like, oh, where is it on the framework? And they get bought into this kind of culture. And it means that the transparency is there. And actually, the most important thing is I'm not everyone's worst enemy, because then suddenly the framework is this kind of non-bias thing that, tells everybody what the answer is. And it's not me just going, I've decided, it's like, it's the framework. So, yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Annette. Thanks for sharing all those insights and your whole journey on Primark so far. It's been fascinating to hear, and it sounds like you're on a upward trajectory, which is fantastic to hear.
Thank you.
One last question. Okay, and you've got a choice. You can either share a book you're reading or share some podcasts that you like to listen to. What would you like to share with the audience? What's top of mind at the moment?
I'm one of these people, I think, because my brain is kind of like in so many different areas at one time. I think with podcasts, I try and like listen to things that are relatively easy, unless I'm, on a long drive or something. I'm like, right, I'm ready to listen to something. But I like listening to people's stories. I think people's life stories, or, the way people have dealt with things, whether that's with work or personally. I think, sometimes you can take real inspiration from that and try and apply it yourself. So one of them is How to Fail by Elizabeth Day. Really easy to listen to. She invites really inspirational people to come on her podcast, and they talk about challenging times in their life and how they've overcome it and how to combat it. It's just a really easy listen. So I tend to just listen to that when I'm cooking. So if anybody fancies it, I would suggest listening to that. But it's pretty much a couple of people babbling along about their personal lives, but also their careers. And there's some real inspirational people on there. So sometimes I'll come away from like listening to a podcast. I'm like, gosh, like, I can't believe that they overcame that. And it just kind of makes you feel lighter. Makes me feel lighter anyway.
That's great to hear. I suppose from my point of view, it's only fair I give a couple of podcasts, I think. And my favorite time to listen is when I'm cooking also, but also when I'm running. I find running quite a good time to listen to podcasts, I think. Current ones are Lenny's podcast from more product side of things. And I'm also a bit of a Freakonomics fan as well. So that podcast is amazing. So those are my two favorite, I think, at the moment. But no, I think we'll wrap up there. Thank you so much again.
Thank you.
And see you, everybody.
Bye.